You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, as always, your TV Guidance Counselor, here to talk about classic television using back issues of TV Guide magazine from my personal collection as the gateway into our collective viewing past. We are deep in the lockdown sessions here, the global pandemic sessions, whatever you want to call them. I have finally figured out, I think, how to continue to do the show in a pretty similar way to how I had been doing it before, now that it is not okay to be face-to-face with people in person. Although I, could easily set up mics 6 feet apart. No one wants to come to my house. That's the bottom line. No one wants to come here, even though it is a wonderland of fun and pleasure. But that's what happens. So anyway, this week, my guest is Eric Fusco, and Eric is a loyal listener and a super smart, interesting guy. He is the creator of the TV Guidance Counselor bingo card. If you've seen that on some of the social media, it is very funny and, for me, frankly, a little depressing, but I forgive him. So what I'm doing is I'm throwing an issue of TV Guide of their choice in my scanner, and a scanner that scans images, not one that blows up people's heads. And I'm emailing them a PDF, and then I have the issue, they have the issue. We sit down and we talk about it, much like things were before the world ended. So it seems to be working. I've appreciated all your feedback for these episodes so far, and I will continue to do this for the foreseeable future. So I hope you guys are doing okay. I hope that the nice weather at least is nice with the windows open or something. I don't know. I'm sitting by my pond outside, so you'll hear birds singing and that sort of stuff. I am still on my property, and if anyone comes near my house without a mask on, they get shot in the face with my power washer. It's not even a hose. It's a power washer. It's going to take an eye out, and that's what they deserve. Anyway, please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Eric Fusco.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Eric Fusco, how are you, sir?
Very good, thank you.
I didn't call you Paul Frisco,
right?
Which is good, but you have a life of having that mispronounced.
Yeah, I was always impressed right away when the first time that you came up with, when you mentioned the creator of ALF and used the same pronunciation that my family uses.
Oh.
Somewhere around 8th grade, freshman year, I just kind of gave up on correcting people. It's also a kind of thing, my grandfather actually came here from Italy and kind of renounced Italian culture. So there is some dispute about that maybe he just changed the pronunciation of it to become more American.
And you're no relation to ALF creator Paul.
Not as far as I know. My grandfather and his brother came over by themselves, I think when they were like 14 and 15. And both of them married sisters. So we have this incestuous little clan of immediate relatives. But as far as, I can track it very closely of people in America, but they could have come from Italy and have been cousins and stuff like that. I don't know. But so.
And you're in New Jersey? Is that
yes.
Right? Okay. All right. You're in New Jersey. That makes sense. For some reason, that also reminded me we had an Italian restaurant in the city I grew up in, Melrose, Mass. And the guy who ran it was a real asshole. His name was Don Caruso. And he literally had photos of himself in the Italian police force in the 40s.
Oh.
Yeah. Full uniform. And he had it up on the wall like, oh, yeah, I'm so proud. It was, oof. He would also just kick people out. They'd be halfway through their meal and he just decided he didn't want them in there and would just kick them out. Yeah.
That's probably not a good business practice.
No, he died, and then the business was locked up and with everything inside it for like 6 years because he had no family and no one who wanted to do anything with it.
There was a soda shop, magazine, greeting card store nearby where I grew up where when the husband died, the wife was so sick of working there. I think they must have owned the building because she closed it, and it was closed since like before I was born. And you would go by there and you could look in the window and it was just trapped in time. And we would just go by, my friends and I would ride our bikes past it and look in the window and try to figure out what comic books were on the rack.
Oh, man.
What could we have gotten?
Oh, you should have broke in.
There was discussions. Yeah.
We had a store in Melrose called ESM that got shut down because of tax purposes. And it had like a deli counter in it as well, you know, a little convenience store. But it was also locked for like 3 years. And the only reason it got unlocked was because people complained to the city about the smell.
That could be a problem. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the kind of town I grew up in. But you asked me for a specific month and year here.
Yes.
So you're also the first recipient of a scanned TV guide in this new social distancing cordoned off world. And this is October 7th to the 13th, 1978, which when I was going through the first week in October through the 70s, almost every issue in that week has a painting of a baseball player that all appear to be by the same person.
Because it occurred to me after I had requested this, I thought I was being all clever since this is the week of my birthday, and it just seemed like a good one to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like 12 years old, which is prime TV guidance counselor, retrospective time. And then it's the same thing that I get reminded of every year when I try to set up plans for my birthday, that it's the World Series that week. And my friends that are huge baseball fans can't do it. So I have to wait. Either A, hope that the Yankees aren't in it, or if they are, then that they finish it up very quickly so we can go out on Saturday, maybe the Saturday night of that week.
Well, I have a wonderful surprise for you this year. I suspect we won't have a World Series.
It's a very good chance, yeah.
If we do, it won't be that week. So, hey, big birthday bash. But you did find some stuff that you would watch, I imagine.
Yes. It was like I was a couple days into this week while I was looking at it, and it's like, why is there nothing here from NBC? And then it occurred to me, like, oh, it's the World Series week came to there. And I actually did a couple of cheats. I looked up what might have been on, if there was nothing good that day, I looked up what the counter program would have been on NBC, and I think I have those towards the week.
That's very thorough. Before we dive in here, I want to mention that there is a really weird article on page 4 that is written by Joyce Carol Oates. And it's called A Private Dream, flashing onto an enormous screen. And it's talking about the Oscar-winning film In the Region of Ice, which will be a short subject on PBS. And it's a whole thing about how Joyce Carol Oates feels about her work being adapted and film. And it's actually a really good article.
Yeah, that's the looking back at one that is this old. And it's what you talk about all the time of that, that there used to be like scholarly articles in TV Guide, and just having to, when I got it to get to the first Saturday, I'm like, scroll. What is this?
There's like 40 pages of articles and a movie poster for a Richard Dreyfuss movie I've never heard of before. And it's Richard Dreyfuss is Moses Wine, private investigator in The Big Fix, a dramedy from Universal. Have you ever seen that?
I never heard of that before in my life.
It's the first and definitely the earliest usage that I know of the term dramedy. And Richard Dreyfuss is holding a gun like a snub-nosed revolver with a crayon shoved in the barrel.
Oh, well, that's the comedy part.
Dreyfuss at the height of his most Dreyfussy. Every Sunday I watch CBS Sunday morning because I'm a million years old. And they had one of Dreyfuss a couple weeks ago where he was just talking about how much of an asshole he's been in his life and was like semi-apologetic, but really not as much as he should be. So this is an LA edition. I looked for a New York area, but I couldn't lay my hands on it. But this seems to have done it. Also want to mention, well, as I'm scrolling, there's a really sexy ad for Kmart with Arnell with these two women in like the most Little House on the Prairie 70s house coats I've ever seen.
Yum, yum.
And there's a whole ad about Marie Curie in here, because I guess there was a made-for-TV movie that week that aired about her discovery and all that sort of stuff. So let's jump in. Saturday night, even though the World Series is going on, What did you do?
I would most likely have been watching Rhoda. The Family was always big on the CBS slate of the MTM sitcoms and stuff of that era. Especially it was kind of local because it was set in New York City, and sometimes you would get on the street B-roll shots of her. Most notably, this had come up just a little while ago on some other podcast that I was listening to, where they made the reference that up until the MASH finale, the highest ratings for a scripted series on TV was Rhoda Gets Married.
Which is totally forgotten now. Like, no one ever talks about that.
I work in marketing, and there's a lot of young women in their mid, maybe they're on their second job out of college. So, 25 to 29 years old in my department. And, a few older people. And I was talking to my contemporaries about that. And we asked the ladies in my department, do you even know who Rhoda is? And they were just completely flummoxed, not the character. We eventually backtracked it to Mary Tyler Moore, but they didn't know that she had a series, didn't know that she got married, didn't know that it was the biggest thing of all time for a few years.
Yeah, it's weird. I wonder why Rhoda... I mean, I think it's probably because, what did it last, 3 seasons? I don't really remember it airing in syndication that much, or at all, really. I think because it wasn't enough episodes or something. It was rare for other generations of people to watch it. And even those girls you work with may or may not, but I think a lot of people even have heard of, like, Luke and Laura, which is, like, the other huge TV event marriage, but don't necessarily know what it is. But the Rhoda thing was just as big. It's really odd how that's just disappeared.
Yeah. I have visceral memories of watching that, just like I said, the stuff on the street where she was in her white wedding gown, like trying to hail a cab or on the subway because Mary was supposed to pick her up and then forgot. They had live action shots in Manhattan of Valerie Harper in the dress trying to get to wherever she was getting married.
Did you go into the city a lot?
Fairly, yeah. I would say more so than my other. I grew up in northern New Jersey. And yeah, we went in quite a bit. My probably every other month to go to like a museum or just to go around and look at things. My mom was really big on that. It was like kind of a big deal. And then years later, going in to see hardcore matinees at CBGB's and shows like that. Whereas I remember it was still a very bad time in the city. First time I really went in by myself was like in junior year of high school. We wanted to go buy good records. And because we were so terrified of the news, and of course, from the Chuds and the Warriors, we knew that the subway was just really dangerous. Took the bus into Port Authority, which is on 42nd Street, and then walked all the way down to where Bleecker Bob's was, which is like around 4th Street.
And the Port Authority at that time is probably the worst place to be.
That too, yeah. And the other thing was like, instead of taking the subway very quickly, we just spent an hour and a half walking the streets of Manhattan.
Basically reliving the Warriors.
Yeah. Looking back on it, it was really stupid. And especially like we didn't know where we were going. After it was all over and like we hit up a couple of record stores, ate, and then it was time to go. It was like almost 5 o'clock and it was time to go home. And my one friend was like, well, we better start walking. I'm like, hey, Mike, I'm going to tell you. It's almost rush hour. This is going to be the safest time ever to be on the subway. So you can walk if you'd like, but I'm taking the A train, and it's going to take 7 minutes, and we're going to be up at Port Authority.
That sounds horrifying. And also, when you said you used to go in to see hardcore, before you said matinees, I was like, wow, he's just going to confess to hanging out in Times Square. Or just there was one theater that only played George C. Scott movies over and over and over again.
Over and over again.
Because this was like, early 80s, which is still in the sort of post-77 coolest year in hell, probably the lowest / coolest point in New York before the Bronx wasn't post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Sort of late 80s. So you're right in that sweet spot of horrifying.
Yeah, and then I went to college also nearby in northern New Jersey. So once we were there, it was like, again, like every other weekend or something, we'd be going in. Sometimes we'd be going in to see the Ramones or, shows at the Ritz. There were Saturdays where like, hey, just want to drive in and go record shopping and drink 40 ounces out of paper bags. Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, because who's gonna stop you? It's New York in the 80s.
Exactly.
I do want to mention this Saturday, so this is October 7th, 1978, in this local LA edition, they're showing Chariots of the Gods, which is always entertaining. And in the ad in the TV guide, there's a ridiculous, it looks like a child's drawing of an alien, but I think it's supposed to be like a cave drawing. And then also at 7 o'clock, there's Evening at the Pops, because the Boston Pops had its own weekly show for a while, which is ridiculous. Right. And in this episode, Ben Vereen is the special guest, which is the same year he was the special guest on SCTV Network 90, or like a year before. So it's like, he's making the weird rounds. And there's an ad for Channel 4 in New York, and in LA, and it's an ad for Family Feud, and it says, join in the fussing and the fighting on Family Feud. But there's like an 8th page ad underneath it that is not related to that Family Feud ad. And I don't know if you have it up in front of you, but
I do.
Can you read that for the listeners?
Actually helps shrink swelling of hemorrhoidal tissues due to inflammation, relieves pain and itch, prompt temporary relief in many cases from pain and itching in such tissues.
So it looks like Family Feud cures hemorrhoids based on this ad, which is just either the most brilliant layout or the worst layout ever.
Well, and then the cartoon of the two families facing each other, and they're all crouched over with their butts protruding, doesn't hurt matters either.
I mean, it looks like a hemorrhoid ad. So you're doing Rhoda at 8. What'd you do at 8:30?
8:30, I would probably flip over to the second half of Chips.
Okay.
Just because there wasn't, again, we're looking at, this is around the point where I'm realizing that there's a whole lot of, there's a third of the network programming is missing. Yeah, probably flip over to that. Just to, it's not that challenging of a story. I could probably pick it up halfway through. I recall times of watching Chips from the beginning, and my older brother I think he's like 15 years older than me. We'd be sitting there watching it together, and how every episode starts with a massive car crash on the highway just about. Yeah. So I'm like 11 or 12. I'm watching this thing, and he's 20 something, and he would just go, okay, that blue Ford, that's going to get in a car wreck. And that yellow, the station wagon, that one's going to be one of the ones that gets wrecked. And he would just sit there and pick out all the cars that were going to get wrecked. Because he has the life experience. He knows he can pick out the new cars from the old cars.
Oh, okay.
I thought he was a genius.
He's not like that GMC Gremlin is going to blow up.
I saw the pilot episode of Magnum PI a few years ago. And, it's the Ferrari versus this rusted clunker on. I'm like, well, I think I know what's going to happen to that car. And sure enough, it blew up like 5 minutes later.
There's a documentary from Canada from the 70s called The Devil at Your Heels. Are you familiar with it?
No.
It's about, I can't remember the guy's name now. It's all up on YouTube, but he was basically the Canadian Evel Knievel.
Okay.
Is exactly what you're picturing. And he would go get cars from junkyards that were barely running, and he was obsessed with making a rocket car. So it would be this like 30-year-old car that barely moves, and he'd put like a rocket on it, and spoiler alert, that's how he died.
Oh,
yeah,
a shame.
Yeah, but it's pretty fascinating to see. I think it's from the late 70s, early 80s, but to see like what cars he's getting from these junkyards, because it's like a 1941 Studebaker and all this stuff. It's just fantastic. So you passed up Good Times That Night, which is not the best episode ever.
No.
This is when JJ gets a job driving buses. What'd you do at 9 o'clock?
Yeah, I kind of had the same relationship with Good Times, sort of like that you have with Roseanne. It's poor people, and they're having problems, and I'm 12, and this doesn't really appeal to me. Looking back on it now, there's some really funny stuff, but yeah, not at the time, no. In the actual, that actual Saturday, I would have definitely watched Sword of Justice with Dak Rambo.
Dak Rambo, my favorite named person.
Rich guy who got unfairly convicted of a crime he did not commit. So he went to prison and used it as a university to learn from criminals so that when he got out, he could, fight injustice.
It's basically like weird 70s Disco Zorro, if I'm remembering that show. I'm going to read what Love Boat was that night because I always like to see the stories, but then I'll tell you what I watched, which is a thing I had never heard of till I flipped through this issue, and I'm dying to see it now. But Love Boat that night is story number 1, a couple played by Robert Urich, Spencer for Hire himself, and Heather Menzies travel to Encita to adopt a baby and end up with a streetwise orphan.
Real life wife, Heather
Yes.
Menzies.
Which makes sense because I have not seen or heard of her in anything else other than that. Steubing and Doc vie for the attentions of an attractive passenger played by Connie Stevens, and an unemployed exec played by Dabney Coleman finds romance with a successful businesswoman played by Rue McClanahan.
Okay. So one, Heather Menzies was the female lead on the Logan's Run, the short-lived Logan's Run TV show.
So she was the Jenny Agutter character.
Yeah. And then I found out only recently that she had been a Playboy Playmate, which if I had known that when I was 12, I would have blown my mind.
Good for Robert Urich.
Right on, man. He seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, by all accounts, everyone who I know who's worked with him said he was a great guy. Obviously, there's a lot of Boston people who complain about him, where they're like, oh, when he was doing Spence, he was a fucking asshole. But I'm like, yeah, what did you do?
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine the guys trying to work and they're like, Spencer! He's probably like, shut the fuck up or something along those lines. But I would watch a movie it'd be impossible now, but just Rue McClanahan and Dabney Coleman having like a screwball comedy romance on a boat. Like, I'd watch that all day.
That sounds like fun.
I'd never not watch that. But there's a show on tonight. It's the debut of a new show called The American Girls. And it has a huge ad on page A30 here. But It says, new show. Tonight, the hottest new series of the season, The American Girls. Amy and Rebecca investigate a haunted house and become the targets of a killer. Pounding suspense in a new action series starring Priscilla Barnes, Deborah Klinger, and David Spielberg. So this is Three's Company, Priscilla Barnes. This is Deborah Klinger, who is my favorite in Midnight Madness. And they further say the girl spent a terrifying night in a Cape Cod house that was once the scene of a grisly murder and is now supposedly haunted. That sounds amazing.
I know what's been added to Ken's search list.
Yes, I wonder, this might be on YouTube, but if I can't find it, if anyone out there has The American Girls, I actually have a copy of a Midnight Madness Australian daybill poster signed by Deborah Klinger, even though I've never met her.
Oh, good.
Yeah, she was part of a singing group called the Klinger Sisters that were on some of those variety shows, but just never... They were like a grade Z. Who were the big sister groups of the time?
Oh, Barbara Mandrell.
The Mandrell sisters. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So that is Saturday night. And, we should look at what Fantasy Island is.
Yes, of course we'd be watching Fantasy Island. Yeah.
This one, we got 2 stories. The first one sounds, again, I'd watch this movie in and of itself. A roller games queen, played by Anne Francis, learns how to be a first-class lady. And then 2 Vietnam veterans, played by Greg Morris and Christopher George, relive their most harrowing combat experience.
How is that a vacation?
I don't know. And how do you pair that with a roller games queen? That seems pretty odd. Nam flashbacks and a roller games queen. That is, that's the 70s in a nutshell, I think there. Sunday night, what'd you do?
Sunday night, Battlestar Galactica.
Is this your favorite television show of all time?
No, it's always pitched like that. When you see the vintage ads, it was like, better than Star Wars. But it really, I remember, leading into the hype for it, that this was going to be the greatest thing ever. Definitely the pilot, the 2-hour pilot's really great. It's made as like a full-fledged standalone movie, which I believe it was released in Europe that way. And it sets up everything you need to know in that show. But then within like 3 episodes, they're doing a retread of Bonanza with where they go to a planet where it's
the Old West.
Yeah, very obviously the Old West, and you've got Pa from Bonanza leading up the crew.
Lorne Greene.
Wouldn't that be the one thing you absolutely do not do?
I think in the 70s they were like, well, we got Lorne Greene. How can you not do Western?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. Did you hear my episode with Jane Seymour when we talked about Battlestar?
Oh, yes. That was good.
There's like, oh, I just got space cancer. They just killed me off because I didn't want to do a TV series. 6 o'clock that night, there's another movie on KTLA, The Outer Space Connection, startling proof that we are not alone in the universe, narrated by Rod Serling.
Starting to see a theme developing.
Yeah, it's sort of Halloweenish, but I'm just wondering, because it's 78, people were just space crazy.
It was a big thing about the power of pyramids and crystals, etc.
Oh, and so nothing has changed.
Yeah, it all comes in cycles.
Let's see if there's anything interesting in this Battlestar Galactica episode. No, this is the one you were talking about. A frontier society. Yeah, that's just pure laziness.
I listen to the Gilbert Gottfried Amazing Colossal podcast a lot, where they deal with a lot of old Hollywood stories, and people have been in the industry for a very long time. One of the things that comes up a lot is the Mary Tyler Moore variety show as being one of the worst things in the world ever.
I like it.
Okay. But when they talk about it, I'm like, I don't recall ever knowing about this or seeing it, or, how did I miss this? And the fact that it was up against Battlestar Galactica would make perfect sense in retrospect.
And it was only, I think it was like 6 episodes as well. It was like a mid-season replacement. Mm-hmm. But it was, I will say the variety, and I have all those episodes if you ever want to see them, but the variety half of the show was terrible. But the idea of the first half was actually kind of cool. I enjoyed it. I've rewatched them recently, and they're still pretty good, but also I'm an insane person. 9 o'clock, what are you doing?
9 o'clock, All in the Family.
This is crying in his cups over a runaway wife. Barney is putting a damper on Archie's saloon business. So is this sort of right before they transition to Archie Bunker's place?
Yeah, this is 78?
That seems early, right?
Right. I mean, eventually, yeah, that was towards the end that he went in for the bar. But it's also like, looking at the credits here, we've got no Rob Reiner, no Gloria, what's her name? Sally Struthers, there.
Do you want to make more money? Sure, we all do.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so this is definitely after they've left, and it's kind of in transition. And then you've got his friend Barney, which is Alan Melville, probably also known as Sam the Butcher from Brady Bunch.
Yes, who is a wonderful drunk on All in the Family, and I like to think subtly a drunk on the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
I just like every time I see him on screen, I'm like, Sam's a functional alcoholic. I have no evidence to support that, but that's just how I choose to watch the show. I'm watching the Gumball Rally, a movie from 1976, which is basically Cannonball Run, but before Cannonball Run, I believe, and starring Gary Busey. This is pre-head injury Gary Busey, pre-Oscar nomination Gary Busey, I think, before he did the Buddy Holly story. I haven't seen this movie in years, but I remember really enjoying it, and I feel like it's probably really awful.
That's a safe bet. I think you're right.
Have you never seen this movie?
I've probably seen bits of it, but nothing springs to mind. I like how in the upper right-hand corner it looks like Dr. Frankenfooter is jumping out of that one car, but I guess that's supposed to be a lady. Yeah,
it looks like they were like, we need a Adrienne Barbeau type character, and someone was like, there's a really hot woman in Rocky Horror. I'll just draw her. Yeah. And it's actually not a woman.
So I think this is a Mort Drucker from Mad Magazine.
It does look like a Mort Drucker.
Yeah.
That has to be a Mort Drucker drawing. It's funny that there was such a overlap of Mad Magazine artists and TV Guide, especially at this time. There's a ton. Yeah. 9:30. Are you doing? There's only 3 things on.
Yeah. That would be Alice. That feel good, laugh a minute, Alice.
This one sounds rough. Vic Tayback may or may not live to regret identifying a holdup man who already served time for pistol whipping a witness in a previous case.
Sounds hysterical.
Nothing's funnier than pistol whipping.
And then I have a distinct memory again of like on a Sunday afternoon watching Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, because it's the movie that inspired Alice.
Yes.
And I'm like 11 and I want to hang myself.
Oh, yeah. What a depressing movie. I still don't even Because it's not like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore was such a massive cultural hit that they're like, man, we are really going to make money off this property. We're going to do toys and sleeping bags and
It's got
big wheels.
legs.
There's also a show that night, which again is outside the parameters, but I see the ad here and it seems kind of interesting, called Lifeline, and it's a reality series about a hospital, and it has one of the most disgusting sounding descriptions I've ever read in a long time. It says, this is the debut, and it says, the toughest case for Theodore Kurz, chief neurosurgeon at Huntington Memorial Hospital in Pasadena, California, is a small boy with an AV malformation, a pulsing mass of blood vessels lodged in his brain.
I don't want to watch that at all.
No.
No.
I am not sold on that. A 17-hour operation on a 6-year-old boy. Like, that's not what I want to watch. But there are people who are obsessed with watching surgeries and stuff.
Yeah, I don't get that at all.
Have you read about those people who like to watch, like, pimple popping on YouTube?
Yeah, I have seen that, and it's interesting of knowing myself and then finding out where my limit is.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that makes me like, if it's me doing it to me, it's very it feels great and I like it. But seeing
really?
other people turns my stomach. And it's also the kind of thing is I have an involuntary reaction when I see someone throwing up.
Oh, that you instantly want to barf?
No, I mean, it doesn't make me, it's not that far, but I recoil. And it's the kind of thing of like, most things don't bother me. And it even gets to the point of, even if it's fake in the worst Roger Corman-esque movie, and just somebody like, I don't have any control over it. And it's just like, why does that bother you so much? I don't know.
I guess it's probably some sort of primal thing where you're like, flee, get away from the sickness or the illness.
Yeah, it must be on a base level.
I'm incredibly squeamish, and first of all, when someone's vomiting, I always laugh, which is probably the incorrect reaction, but mostly just because I find the sounds of it really funny.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I'm in a TMI right now, so everybody cover your ears if you don't want to hear this. I broke my toe back in January or something, and the nail is like starting to fall off 6 months later.
Yeah.
And it's grossing me out. I'm like, I can't even think about it, and it's my own thing. And I'm like, I'm going to vomit because of myself. And then I'd probably laugh.
Yeah. Well,
that's my particular...
We all compensate in our own ways.
It's true. But it's just a funny noise. Like, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's what I think puke noises are right up there with farts for funny.
There you go. You know, it's a reason why they've been around for so long.
They do the
comedy staple.
They do the research, and they're like, guys, puking still doing really well. I think we might overtake farts. Monday night, what'd you got?
Monday night.
I will say, while you're looking, there's something I would pick that I would never pick, but there's a really obvious reason why I picked this.
My choice would be WKRP in Cincinnati.
Okay.
This is a landmark episode.
It's true, and tell the people why.
This is the punk rock episode. Andy thinks the British punk rock band he's booked for a concert is merely way out. Then he learns they attack their audiences. And I believe that it ends up with they get into a fist fight with Dr. Johnny Fever and Venus. And they win. Yeah,
this is basically shitting on the Sex Pistols, who had just broken up in America in 1977, I think, the previous year, probably when this episode was written. So this was a fairly contemporary episode. And it's funny with this episode seeing how the news media at the time, and this is Malcolm McLaren obviously wanted this to happen, but he booked the Sex Pistols at honky-tonk redneck bars in America on that tour because he wanted news footage of fights and stuff. And it worked so well on most of America, who were like, fuck those people. And this episode is sort of a prime example of the sort of fallout from that specific tour. Although KRP was pretty open to some punk stuff. I remember there's like the Clash was featured in a bunch of episodes, not them physically, but
Right.
there was posters and music, but this one definitely is a punk rock scare episode.
Coincidentally, Michael DeBar, who's a guest star on this episode, goes on to be in the WKRP syndicated series.
Oh, the new WKRP?
Yeah.
With French Stewart?
Like him and his, it was. I only saw a few of them, but as I recall, it was him and his character's wife were the morning team on WKRP.
He is not reprising his role in this episode as the character Dog. But so I would have watched the show I never watched. I would have watched Little House on the Prairie. And the reason is Ray Boulger plays an old man cheated out of his $5,000 lottery prize by Charles's unfeeling employer. And then this has to be pun on purpose. It's the last straw for many in Walnut Grove. Obviously, because Ray Boulger was the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz and is from Dorchester, Mass. It didn't pop up that often. I mean, we're in 1978, so this is almost 40 years after Wizard of Oz. 1939, so we're talking 40 years later. So Ray Bulger's got to be like on his deathbed at this point.
He had to get his episode in for his health coverage.
That's right. That's pretty amazing. At 8:30,
you would go with this very special episode of MASH. It takes a serious semi-documentary form. Interviews filmed in black and white are conducted among the personnel by visiting TV correspondent played by former TV newsman Cleet Roberts. This is a super bummer MASH episode when they've just decided to stop being funny and be poignant and perfect for 12-year-olds. I can't wait to talk about this on the playground tomorrow. This
is maybe the second or third most famous episode of MASH, I would probably venture to guess, outside of the finale. And it was highly unusual. It was presented exactly as if it was a news program. So it was like any other news program they had done during Vietnam where they're interviewing the soldiers. And it is really heavy. And it's talked about often for good reason. Yeah. It's very good TV, but it is not remotely funny. And the ad is interesting because it does show, is it Klinger, the one who would wear the dress all the time?
Right.
Jimmy Farr. So it's like, oh, look, he's in a dress. But then it goes out of its way to say this is a full hour dramatic special.
Yeah. And in the lower corner here, we see BJ and Hawkeye just laughing it up. And that doesn't happen at all. So you in retrospect, we know that this is one of the most talked about, groundbreaking, ratings grabbing episodes of MASH. So with that in mind, excluding that, if you're out at a local LA station, what would you counter program this 1 hour MASH episode with?
The only thing you can fight MASH with, MASH, the movie from 1970. I mean, why not? You might as well fight MASH with MASH.
Yeah.
Maybe they would think, oh, someone might be flipping through and go, oh yeah, this is MASH.
Yeah, it always makes me wonder on Super Bowl Sunday when you have to counter program against that. Like, why isn't somebody just showing, why isn't there a cable station doing a Star Trek marathon, or you put Empire Strikes Back against it, or so, rather than trying to put something kind of football related.
Yeah, it's a weird move, and I wonder how well it did. But I guess if you own the rights to air the movie MASH, you might as well put it up against MASH, because you're not going to get less viewers than you would have. I don't know. There's also a world premiere movie on that night called Secrets of the Hungry Wives. Mark Powers gave every woman a reason to kill him until finally someone did. And Jessica Walter is one of the women, who is the mom from Arrested Development. And also one of the women, Eve Plum, Jan Brady herself.
Break out, or, trying to break the stereotype for her.
Yeah, I would love to see Eve Plum. Obviously, I've never seen this movie, but I have to imagine Eve Plum is the one that murders him.
I would hope so.
Is that everything on Monday night? Yeah, because MASH is an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole night. Let's do Tuesday. What do you got?
Tuesday... Tuesdays are the Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley powerhouse.
This is the Gary Marshall night.
Yeah.
And you absolutely watched it at the time?
Yeah, I can remember for whatever reason it was. I guess it's the third season is the famous Jump the Shark premiere episode. And for whatever reason it was, I got to sleep over at a friend's house that night, and we watched it together. My best friend from grammar school, and I remember both of us at the time being like, "That kind of sucked." Like, yeah. How could it be Happy Days, but it sucked? Because it was the first idea of, this planting the seed of like that this stuff could be something we like, could be something bad.
Yeah, it's seeing something fall from grace. That is the difficult thing, is when you're like, wait, this isn't going to be amazing forever?
Yeah.
Someone could have counter-programmed it with American Graffiti at the same time.
I wonder if you look back. Well, if anybody has the ability to do that, you could look through and see.
That's true.
Collection.
There's another documentary series on at the same time. I don't know what was up with 1978, but called Shock Trauma. Doctors, nurses, patients, and Maryland Governor Marvin Mandel are among those describing the University of Maryland Hospital's shock trauma unit. That sounds horrible.
Sounds like a riot. That sounds great.
That's what, the fourth medical thing we've had this week, and it's only Tuesday?
Well, I guess it goes back to the thing of like that. It's not free, but there's a reason why doctor shows are, there's always a doctor show on, that people like that sort of stuff. True. And this is real life, and it's it's probably cheaper to do than writing something.
It's also a weird thing to have it be Maryland, so I'm wondering if there was some like weird state tax incentive for them to come shoot something in a Maryland hospital, because that's not exactly a hotbed of Hollywood production there. Laverne and Shirley is one of the classic cliche episodes that night, as they are contestants on a quiz show.
Yeah, Laverne and Shirley is just I Love Lucy without husbands.
Yeah.
They just get into all sorts of crazy crazy schemes, and hilarity ensues. I remember an interview with I think it was Dave Thomas from SCTV, and they were asking him like, parodies that they do on SCTV are so funny. Was there anything you ever tried to do that didn't work? And he said, yeah, we tried to. It was going to be him and Rick Moranis as Laverne and Shirley, and they just couldn't make it work because there was nothing. It's like there's nothing so outlandish that wouldn't actually happen on the real show.
Yeah, it's really hard to parody a comedy, and SCTV might be the only people who I've ever seen do it really well. And yeah, if they can't do it, it's not possible.
Here's a question that I've posited this in like SCTV groups and things, and I've never gotten a real answer from it. But like, did SCTV innovate the idea of a skit where it's a famous person portraying another character?
It's the first I can think of it.
Right.
But yeah, it's like the two levels of impression kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's possible. I will do some research on that.
Yeah, I think there's so much that they did that was amazing and whatnot, but I think there might be a case made for that groundbreaking innovation.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. Let's give it to him. We'll give it to him. We have the power to give it to him. Did you do Three's Company at 9?
Yes. Jack and Chrissy suspect Mrs. Roper of having an affair, especially when she requests the use of their apartment for the evening.
Which is probably, I'm going to go out on a limb, say that's probably a misunderstanding.
Yeah, it could be.
Although, Mrs. Roper, very horny.
Yeah. Now, I was thinking about this the other day because I have nothing but time to sit around and think about stuff with the, being under the lockdown and stuff. What if Mr. Roper was gay?
And that's why she was never satisfied? Think
about it. He's constantly avoiding her. He's obsessed with Jack.
True.
He's overcompensating with gay panic.
Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if he was playing him that way. That would be an interesting way. I don't know if it was written that way, but I wonder if Norman Fell decided to play it that way, which would be pretty ingenious.
Or is it they're portraying him as guys from that time who were like that, who were also secretly gay?
You know what? Could be all of the above.
Go.
And then did you do Taxi at 9:30?
Taxi?
Which is the weird odd man out in that 4-show block.
That was Taxi's always a hit or miss because it could be like a wacky, funny show, or it could be a depressing, class comedy about how that they're poor and other people are rich and made to feel crappy about their jobs. And I think that this one kind of falls into the second half of that.
Oh, absolutely. And it just sticks out for a lot of reasons, especially right after Three's Company, which is the most swinging 70s Santa Monica, California show. And then you get this dark, grim New York all-night taxi cab show, which couldn't be more different. That is a real come down. Man. And then you got right after that, Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah, I guess, this being a school night, I might catch a little bit of Starsky and Hutch and then go to bed. I don't have a lot of memories of watching. It wasn't like a favorite show. I think this is at the point where when I was doing this, where after this, I started looking up what was on NBC, because there must have been something lighter on than this, the Starsky and Hutch with the lovable pimp.
And Sally Kirkland, I think, is in this episode. Yeah, she is. Also, the reason I could tell this is an LA edition of TV Guide, even if I didn't know before we get to Tuesday, is on page A103, there's an ad it says, modeling. It's a man's job. Call for a free screening at the Barbizon School for Modeling. And we would not have that probably in any other state, I'm guessing.
Totally not a scam.
Tuesday, 8 o'clock, what'd you do?
Tuesday, 8 o'clock, we go to 8 is Enough.
I can't watch it. I just can't.
Oh, it's
I don't know what it is. It's like I have that instant like 70s repulsion. It's like you and vomit. It's the best way to describe it.
I mean, it was a show that was on. It was acceptable because it was a kind of family show, and they had like 9 teenage daughters on it. So
yeah, it was the Partridge Family without the singing.
Which all of them, none of them looked remotely related, which always bothers me.
Yeah. Which made me think that there's some subtext that they're all like kidnapped children who've been told they're a family.
Well, the guy, it's based on a true story. Tom Bradshaw, I think is the guy's name, who was he was a columnist in Washington, D.C., but had also had a previous career as a director at the CIA.
Oh, well, but they don't mention that in the show.
Wouldn't that have made it so much more interesting if Dick Van Patten was, going off and planning assassinations in South America?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you've just pitched the world the reboot we need right now.
Yeah.
There is an after-school special on that day, which I only bring up because of all the baseball talk. It's an ABC after-school special called Home Run for Love. A summer of baseball and a shy young boy will never be the same. Sammy is a lonely boy, too shy to make friends. Davy is an old man, too young in spirit to fill his age. Although there are 50 years between them, they have one thing in common, a passion for baseball.
I actually stopped paying attention halfway through that.
You couldn't pay me to watch that for half an hour. So 8 is Enough is a full hour. Mm-hmm. A show that would, if I'm remembering correctly, that would get heavy on occasion.
Yeah.
But not always. And then at 9 o'clock, what'd you do?
Oh, Charlie's Angels. I'm on the precipice of becoming a teenager, so this is prime viewing, in the house at that time.
This episode has a very special guest star. See if you can recognize it. Who, if I'm remembering correctly, maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but Mercedes McCambridge, who I believe did the voice of the possessed Reagan in The Exorcist.
That sounds right. Yeah.
She's playing Norma.
The Angels investigate the murder of a Broadway star at the exclusive spa for women.
It sounds pretty hot.
That's probably her. And this is after the first season when we have Cheryl Ladd coming in to sub in for Farrah Fawcett. Again, right around this time, much like my Happy Days insight of the cheapness in Charlie's Angels when they switch over after the first season, that the opening is, once upon a time, there were 3 little girls who went to the police academy, 2 in Los Angeles, 1 in San Francisco. Like, they re-record the whole thing. There's an obvious drop in.
But they do it when Cheryl Ladd's on screen, so people aren't listening to anything.
Yeah, well, that's there's a Charlie's Angels episode that takes place at the Magic Castle in L.A., and she's in the modified, women's magician outfit top hat and tails, but, short shorts and fishnets. It's one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah. Oh, there's a little Zatanna action going on there. Opposite that is a 1976 TV movie starring Sam Elliott as a Southern California lifeguard in this drama Lifeguard, which is about a 32-year-old beach boy pondering a change in his lifestyle. It also has Ann Archer, Parker Stevenson, Kathleen Quinlan, and as a character called Machine Gun, Steve Burns.
Nice.
But it has an amazing, airbrushed, looks like it should be on the side of a van.
Yeah.
Artwork poster of Sam Elliott shirtless with these two women. It's
look at the size of his chest.
Yeah, I don't think Sam Elliott.
They put his head on a bear.
Yeah, he's very hairy as well.
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty amazing thing. So that is all of Wednesday? We're on Wednesday? Yeah.
Hold on. What's interesting about the fact that Parker Stevenson is in a movie about lifeguards?
He was in the first season of Baywatch, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. It'd be great if that was his same character. This was a weird 20 years too early or 10 years too early prequel to Baywatch.
Yeah.
I would watch a 70s set Baywatch now. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just Southern California, 1976 lifeguard show.
We're pitching a Netflix series.
Yeah, we sold 3 shows already.
It doesn't need to. It can just be one season. We don't need to keep going. No.
You'd have 13 episodes. You'd have an arc. That's all you need, and everyone would be very satisfied. It would also probably solve. I mean, I don't want to go too far with the hyperbole, but it would probably solve all of the world's problems, including all historical problems. And just go back in time and just rewrite history in the best possible way. Thursday night. What are you going with?
I'm sorry, you're the host, but I have to put my foot down. We can't jump into Thursday. This won't be an episode of TV Guidance Counselor if we don't check in the pre-Spencer series Vegas on at 10 o'clock.
You're right. This was what everyone knew Robert Urich from at the time when he went by Bob Urich. A crooked land developer terrorizes a feisty old lady who is preparing to blow the whistle on his shady practices. Tony Curtis is in this episode. Judy Landers, the older Landers sister. Also, Anne Francis is in this as well. This is the third show she's guest starred in this week.
She was having a renaissance.
Yes, as well she should. Anne Francis was Honey West, right? Am I thinking correctly? And is in Forbidden Planet? Honey West is such a great show. How has that not gotten a reboot? A sexy super spy who knows kung fu and has a giant serval cat? That's not a show that would air on anything, right? That would be a huge hit.
I'm sold.
Vegas is a show I never really got into.
He was a private eye with a convertible, and he parked in his living room.
There was a weird sort of, I don't want to call it subgenre, but a weird fad of setting shows in Las Vegas in the 70s for a little bit. Because Kolchak is set in Vegas. The second one, I think, is in Vegas. The Night Strangler, right? That's Vegas. There was a few shows that were set in Vegas, and I feel like it's just because people in California just wanted to go there.
Yeah.
It's probably my guess. Thank you for that side note that we had to get the Vegas in. Thursday, what'd you do?
Thursday, even though Mork and Mindy was very popular, and looks like it's first season because Conrad Janis is in it, and there's they still have the music store, and it has the extra added incentive of Morgan Fairchild's guest starring on this. I would have watched Project U.F.O. with my parents because I remember that we would watch it and. It was what's the guy who does Dragnet?
Jack Webb.
It was a Jack Webb produced show, and I remember my family pointing out that it's a procedural just like Dragnet. You had 2 guys from the Air Force who were going around investigating UFO claims, and usually it would be there'd be 3 instances or maybe 2 or 3 instances that they're investigating at the time. And 2 of them would be explained away by a natural phenomena. It was a plane. It was swamp gas. And there'd always be one at the end where they'd be like, oh, we don't know what happened on that one.
It was like a boring, unsexy X-Files.
Yeah. There was barely any interplay between the 2 primary characters. One was an older, more grizzled Air Force colonel, and the other guy was a younger, funnier Air Force guy with a bit of a Southern accent, and was just barely lasted a season, and that was it. It was all the post Close Encounters mania.
Again, the Chariots of the Gods, Aliens Among Us. A show that I would always mix up with U.F.O., which is the Martin Landau, Jerry Anderson show, I think.
You're thinking of Space 1999.
Space 1999.
Well, that's the thing. That they made UFO for a season. It didn't really take off, and then they kind of retooled it and used a lot of the same sets for Space 1999.
Okay, so I'm not totally off base.
Yeah,
I just remember
they're both Jerry Anderson series. The UFO, I remember seeing that as a kid and just being really into it because I was like into anything science fiction. You watch it now, it's like really dark. The lead character isn't particularly that nice, but also they have a special contingent of the UFO fighters who are in a submarine, and for some reason the women walk around in fishnet tops and like no bra.
And also have like cool punk rock hair colors.
Those are the ones on the moon base.
Okay.
They all have purple hair. They all wear the same purple wigs because of course you do.
What was the sci-fi show with Buck Henry and the twins?
Oh, Quark.
Quark, yes.
Yeah, that was
Richard Benjamin, yes.
Yeah.
Of Saturday the 14th fame. And then there was another TV show around the time that I feel like Harlan Ellison worked on called The Star Lost.
Star Lost? Yes.
Okay. This was all in this sort of era.
And Keir Dullea from 2001 was one of the main characters. If you want to, for you or for somebody listening, check out the podcast Canceled Too Soon. It's from the critically acclaimed network. One of their regular episodes, they do a bunch of different review shows. The one that got me into it, and I think would be the most interesting for the crossover with TV Guidance Counselor, is called Canceled Too Soon. They review TV series that were one season or less. And one of the episodes they did this year was for The Star Lost. And they do other things like maybe it's a pilot episode that was pitched as a movie, but it was supposed to be. There's one of, I forget the name of it, but it was basically Amish people in California. The cool young teacher moves from the city, woman to start teaching them, and discovers that they're actually aliens with telekinetic powers. Oh, which is, again, probably falls right into that early to mid 80s obsession with the Amish. And William Shatner is in it as like the third lead. Okay. And he plays like the local doctor from the town over. And he's subdued and fantastic. Is it more like him in The Intruder, which is probably his best role, even though he's the villain? No, because he's very like nice and soft, low key, because he's not the star and he doesn't have to carry everything. And I guess the director really just gave him what for. Yeah, that's probably it as well. There's a show debuting that day called Freestyle. And this is a children's show. It's a debut. And I bring it up only because it's somewhat unusual. It says, a drama series designed to increase youngsters' awareness of career possibilities and sex role stereotyping. What? Huh? What? Yeah. First up, a girl and a boy, played by Jennifer McAllister and Mark Jefferson, become partners in a household repair business. I wonder if that was remotely successful in achieving the goal that they have set out to achieve. I'm thoroughly confused. Also that night, In Search of is on at 7:30. Leonard Nimoy takes you in search of Jack the Ripper. Yeah, that was like crack for me around this time. I love him. It was a guy from Star Trek plus Unsolved Mysteries. It's I have all those episodes. I often rewatch In Search of. It's just fantastically silly. Yeah. Anything else? Complete bullshit. Oh, absolutely. Well, it's like that Amazon Women in the Moon. Bullshit or not. Yeah, that's exactly. And then, unless you did What's Happening at 9:30. Oh no, Project UFO is an hour, isn't it? Right, but on other times, yeah, I was somebody who did, for some reason, What's Happening was okay, but what was the other show? Good Times. Good Times wasn't. I guess What's Happening was far more cartoonish. It came across in my Facebook feed a little while ago, a vintage ad. And it was, that Rerun thinks he's Fonzie. And I was able to, find a streaming service that has I think it's Crackle, has all the What's Happenings. And this is apparently in like the last season. Rerun gets a job as a page, an ABC page. And they go, he takes the gang backstage and they find the room where they keep all the costumes for all the shows. And they each put on like a costume from a current TV ABC show, and imagine what it would be like if I was in this. So, he's Fonzie, and Ernest or Roger is Richie, and they do Happy Days, they do Mork and Mindy. I forget there's like a third one that they do, but it's like whoever they're parodying. It's an ABC show parodying other ABC shows, and if you told me the person who wrote that had never seen these shows and was just going by a secondhand description of them, that would make more sense.
That probably is accurate.
Yeah, they do. The other one they do Mork and Mindy, and Raj and Dwayne show up, and they're supposed to be aliens, and they're just bleep blorp aliens. I'm like, they never had that on the show. You could do something like that, but that's not Mork and Mindy. And I happened to go look on IMDb. I'm like, who wrote this crap? Let me go see who it was. Turns out, though she was not an accomplished screenwriter, I forget the woman's name, but she went on to marry George Carlin and was his last wife.
Oh, very weird.
So she must have been funny sometimes, just not on that show.
Well, that episode to me sounds like we need a cheap episode.
Yeah.
We only have the three of them, and we want to use sets that are already in the building kind of thing. So they probably whipped it up. I thought you were going to say Gary Shandling wrote that episode, because he was a scab at that time.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. That's how he got into the business. When there was a writer's strike, he wrote Good Times, Sanford and Son, I want to say a Three's Company and something else, but he was as a scab when the union had gone on strike, and he wrote all those shows. And people forget that when they talk about how great he is. Where are we? What's happening? And then 9 o'clock, what'd you do?
We're going to go with Quincy.
Ooh, so you have forsaken Barney Miller that evening.
It was a conscious choice. I feel like, maybe since it is Barney Miller is a square on the TV Guidance Counselor bingo card.
That's true, that you created.
We can move over and maybe investigate another show. Quincy at the time is, the people make fun of him. Well, yes, he was really over the top, but the fact that the coroner doing these autopsies would, it's so incredible that he would find clues that would convict someone. This is CSI before it's CSI.
Oh, for sure.
Every show is this.
It was odd to focus on the medical autopsy stuff. Even though Quincy wasn't sort of filled with Gru, most murder mysteries at this time were like, oh, he fell forward, where they said that he was hit from behind, and we know that there's, it was like scene stuff, not like in this episode where the autopsy reveals he has amphetamines in his blood,
And I rewatched a bunch of Quincy a few years ago, like pretty much like the whole series on some streaming or whatever. Not one that you can, again, like 70s 1 hour dramas, especially like crime dramas or adventure, do not hold up to binge watching. Because it's just the same thing every week.
It's formula.
Whereas now, characters have arcs over the whole season, and the writers are aware that people are going to be watching these in succession. So, they take that into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, I think people tuned in for the formula just as much as the characters. Like a week in between was enough time for them to sort of crave that formula instead of the characters, which is an interesting way that the programming and the way we watch things changes how the content is created, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. This one also is at the Grand Prix for some reason.
Because you do, yeah.
Also, just want to mention Merv Griffin is on that night from Las Vegas, and the guests are Sergio Franchi, Anne Murray, Fred Willard, who we recently lost, and magician David Copperfield. Very early Copperfield at that point.
Yeah,
this would have been when he was in Magic or Terror Train, I think was 1980.
Could be.
So that's an hour. That's your whole night?
Pretty much.
A Night Gallery's on at 10 o'clock. Mysticism, dreams of immortality, and an avenging ghost all enter this murder mystery about a drowning victim. And this is, here's a big deal. The debut, what day are we? October 12th, 1978. The debut of sneak previews with critics Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel review recent and upcoming films in this new bi-weekly series. First up, Death on the Nile. So I had no idea if that's a good piece of trivia. The very first movie reviewed by Siskel and Ebert on television was Death on the Nile.
Yeah, and that show was huge.
Oh yeah, they were able to negotiate. They called the bluff of PBS, left sneak previews, and had their own syndicated show, and it was massive.
But they did it like 2 or 3 times.
Oh yeah,
where it just came back with a different name, and it was like, God bless them.
Well, it's interesting because for film critics, like every local TV station on their news crew had a film critic, like a film and arts critic. And then there were a couple that people knew nationally because they were like New York or LA. You had Rex Reed and Gene Shalit, but they weren't the go-to movie critics. And Siskel and Ebert really managed to take themselves not quite out of obscurity, but you're in Chicago, which is a third city, and you all of a sudden are able to make yourselves the pop culture authorities on film. Like, no question, the most famous film critics there is at the time. And that's kind of amazing. And Friday night, finally.
It wasn't on Friday nights in locally. I'm going to break the format here a little bit and start at 7:30.
Okay.
The Muppet Show.
Yes.
I believe that was like on Monday or Tuesday in New York, because it was the kind of thing of the nights that I specifically had to have my homework done before 7:30 so I could watch The Muppet Show.
And it was a genius move by Jim Henson to get the Muppets in as a first-run syndicated show. It was one of the first shows that was a first-run syndicated show, and he went to the company that produced shows in England that would resell them as technically first run in the US market, but just bypassing them as British shows. And it was a brilliant move after getting turned down by every network. And one of the reasons that they got turned down by every network was not because of the content, and you may know this already, but it was because they wanted the show to be on after 7:00. That was the time slot they wanted. And all the networks that would have greenlit it were like, okay, we'll put it on Saturday morning. We'll put it on 3:00 after school for kids. And they were like, no, we want this on between 7 and 8:00, and no one would do it. So that's why they went with syndication.
It certainly works. Muppets always work for children, but the Muppet Show was working on 2 different levels of, it was like Bugs Bunny, where there was jokes for kids and there was jokes for adults.
Yeah, and not jokes for adults that were just like thinly veiled dick jokes, like just smart jokes or jokes that were allusions or references to things that were just too old for kids to know, really.
Right.
And yeah, I love the Muppet Show. It is amazing. And to plug that interview I did with John Cleese that no one has really watched, talking to him about when he hosted the Muppet Show was one of the highlights of everyone I've ever, no offense to you, Eric, one of the highlights of, all the interviews I've ever gotten to do. It was just so amazing to hear him firsthand talk about working on the Muppet Show. And, I don't know why. I think he might be the only person I've ever talked to that was on the Muppet Show, let alone hosted it. And, it was just fantastic.
Besides the fact that he is also John Cleese.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. I mean, if you want to,
but like
whatever.
Between the Muppet Show and Bugs Bunny and things like that, there was a generation that got introduced to vaudeville, to 40s movies references, from all this different stuff from the hit. You were forced to learn your parents' history. The kind of thing now, like of talking with people in their 20s now, of having like just not even that. I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it, or have no point of reference of what you're even talking about. Right.
And then you try to explain it using other examples that they don't know what they are either.
My, the best example of this is, I sat next to, I had this woman reporting to me who was like 26 or 27. And we'd talk about stuff, and she never got my references to anything. I mentioned something about Buffy the Vampire Slayer one day, and she got very excited and said, "Oh, I've heard of that,"
but had not seen it. Just heard of
it. I would, I'm thinking like if you're like 26, 27, now a young woman, especially, of course you watched Buffy. It was like progressive and feminist and stuff like that. No.
Yeah. Well, also you were 6 years old when it aired.
Yeah, that's the really tough part.
Oh yeah, I was watching that tribute to the Graduates thing that aired on all the networks the other night, and the thing that hit me as being insane was that these kids graduating high school were born in 2002. It was like, Jesus Christ, I feel horrifically old.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, insane. I do want to mention Leo Sayer is the guest on the Muppet Show that night. It's kind of a weak link episode, but the Hollywood Squares that night, wow. This is, all right, we got Paul Lynde, which you have to have.
Yeah.
Priscilla Barnes, Steve Lattisberg from Barney Miller, Rich Little, who I hate, Maureen Jensen, Hervé Villachez,
Yeah.
George Gobel, Diana Canova, and Deborah Klinger of the Klinger sisters.
I would imagine that Priscilla and Priscilla and Deborah were probably in the same square.
Yeah, because they were promoting that show that
they're promoting that together.
That show that we had never heard of, The American Girls, where they're in a haunted house in Cape Cod with a murderer.
And then,
Which it's like a dream I'd have. If I was like, I had a dream last night, I was in Cape Cod in a murder house with Priscilla Barnes and Deborah Klinger, you'd be like, that sounds like a perfect Ken Reed dream.
Hervé, who was upset that he wasn't a bigger star and wanted to know
pun intended, huh?
Yeah. Why did Tom Selleck get more girls than I do? I'm on TV too.
Yeah, he was living with Susan Terrell at this time. They lived together, which is why they're both in Forbidden Zone.
Right.
And right before she died, Susan Terrell was an absolute lunatic.
Yeah.
But I saw an interview with her, and this was after she had already lost her legs to diabetes, I think.
Oh.
But she said, why did I date Hervé? Because I really wanted to fuck a midget. And they were like,
is there another reason?
Yeah, she's like, no, I'm serious. Like, she was like, oh, perfect. And there's also a game show I've never heard of called Love Experts. And its celebrity panelists include George Edwards, June Lockhart, Joyce Bulifant, and Bernie Kopell. Channel 9 plans an announcement warning that this program is not suitable for all family members.
It's not suitable for anyone.
Now, Bernie Kopell talking about love advice in an unsuitable way sounds like a nightmare I would have.
That sounds creepy as all.
Did you do Wonder Woman at 8?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
That was also a very important show in my development. Linda Carter is, I don't care, go look. Oh, you just have fond memories of her as a child. No, she's stunningly beautiful.
She still is.
Yeah,
she still is. And actually, great follow on social media. Very funny. This episode I remember specifically. This is a sculptor's remarkably lifelike statues play a key role in a series of art thefts that run into millions of dollars and seem to be inside jobs. The villain in that episode, who is Henry Roberts, is played by Roddy McDowell. And I believe his henchman is played by Ed Begley Jr.
Do you appreciate that connection that you have to this episode?
I suppose.
You're friends with Dana Gould.
Yes.
Who used to live in Roddy McDowell's house.
Which I've been in. I've been in the actual bathroom that Roddy McDowell flushed his bowels in.
Yeah.
So I guess that means I've basically met Linda Carter.
There you go.
Also, some friends of mine used to live next door to Ed Begley Jr. and I've been to their house.
Not as exciting, but still.
Not as exciting. Gavin MacLeod is in this episode as well, speaking of Love Boat.
That's All-Star. I got the trial for DC Universe last year and, just binge watched a ton of shows that were on there. One of them being, Wonder Woman, which only ran 3 seasons. And first of all, like the first season when they're in World War II is so incredibly sexist and horrible. And just absolutely preposterous, where there'd be, the wrap up was like, that Diana Prince is jealous of Wonder Woman because Wonder Woman is so amazing and beautiful. And it's just like, wait, you don't think that Diana Prince is just the most beautiful woman you've ever seen just wearing glasses? Because she's not hiding it at all.
It was the same time you had Bailey on, KRP, who had similar glasses, and everyone was like, oh, she's so ugly.
Yeah, she's the ugly one. And then in the third season, one of the very last episodes, when it's been updated to late 70s, 78, 79, and she's playing essentially like a CIA agent, IADC. I remember she flies into to LA, gets in a cab, and it's like one of the guys from Knots Landing or something like that. He was up and coming, and he starts chatting her. It's like, if you need anything, here's my number. I'll show you around LA. And she goes, listen, there's a car following us. I'm an IADC agent. I need you to lose him. At which point, he just kind of takes over and starts telling her what, like he loses them. And then they get out of the car and he tells her to run away and tells her what to do and shit. Now, obviously, this is so she can get away and turn into Wonder Woman.
Right.
However, like there used to be a woman who lived around the corner from me who was in the Secret Service.
Oh.
And it was just like, okay. Like, besides the fact that she just had a bearing and about herself, like you just knew, like what she told, like, hey, can you pick that up? Yes, I'll do that for you. Sort of thing. Like him just telling her what to do.
It doesn't make any sense. They basically rebooted Wonder Woman for season 2 and 3 as a one-woman Charlie's Angels.
Yeah.
That was still treated very sexist and not in a winking, knowing way. It wasn't like, she'll get the best of them. They don't even know. I do want to mention at 8 o'clock on Channel 9 in LA, they were showing the Dario Argento movie, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage from 1969, which is kind of cool. Where are we? 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock. Incredible Hulk.
Such a weird thing that I believe this was ABC, which was airing The Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman. You have a DC show and a Marvel show, same network, back to back. This one is a typically boring Incredible Hulk. Thinking he has found a cure for his malady, David seeks out a horse trainer who has developed an organic substance that reportedly tames wild animals.
He's going to take horse tranquilizers. Yes. I think it'll work.
It probably work. Like nothing. The Incredible Hulk is like, man, how do I stop changing into this pure rage beast? I wonder if anything they do for horses could help me. Yeah. It's ridiculous. I'm going with a made-for-TV movie that I have not seen or heard of that is on at 9 o'clock, but it sounds amazing. This is You Need a Guide for the Married Man. This is Infidelity as Played for Laughs and a Guide for the Married Man, 1978 TV movie, and it stars Sybil Shepherd as Julie, Barbara Feldon, Richard Kelton is in it, Peter Marshall, Bernie Kopell again, John Hillerman, Eve Arden, and as the character is called, tennis pro Chuck Woolery. The man who blocked me on Twitter when I asked him about his prostate after he said something racist.
You opened the door. So.
Yeah. Chuck Woolery, tennis pro.
What role did the tennis pro play in a Guide for the Married Woman?
There was like a 8-year period when America was obsessed with tennis pros.
Yeah.
It was like tennis pros replaced CB radios. Like there was just like some weird thing that ended up being in every show, and tennis pros was it.
It was shorthand for, what do you call it? Infidelity.
Yeah, tennis pro was the male equivalent of like the nanny everyone sleeps with. Yeah. It was a Swedish nanny and a tennis pro. Which was actually played very well for laughs. Speaking of DC, the DC app on Doom Patrol, they did some really great tennis pro material in that as well. Anything else you have on Friday night?
10 o'clock, we've got Flying High. When we're talking about Charlie's Angels ripoffs, we have Flying High, a show about 3 stewardesses and the hijinks they get involved in. Notably, this brings it's the debut of Connie Selica.
Yes. As Lisa. Yeah. And Scatman Carruthers is in this show as a character called Skycap. And the character of Mac is played by an actor I've never heard of before who goes by the name Big John Hamilton. Maybe he was an ex-football player or something. This was also the era of ex-athletes acting in things. Of course, I wouldn't know, but Big John Hamilton sounds like it could have been. But that's ballsy to be like, hey, I want you to credit me as Big John Hamilton. No. Not John Hamilton. Big John Hamilton.
You got, Tiny Lister, who is a big giant guy who just, plays monsters and things like that. So, he can get away with it. But
I wonder if it's the kind of thing like, how if there's someone already in SAG with the same name, which is why like Michael J. Fox had to put the J in, which he just made up because he liked Michael J. Pollard. But I wonder if if in the 70s you could be like, but I'm just big. They're like, what? Don't you just want to be like John J. Hamilton? And he's like, no. Big John Hamilton.
It was a different time. Things were a lot more loose.
There's also, before we wrap up, a very interesting article in here about westernization of China's television programming. And it talks about I Love Lucy going over there, and just it's kind of a fascinating snapshot of Western television programming going into China circa 1978, which is very, very odd and interesting to me. And that is it. Anything else you'd like to add from this issue? Did we miss anything?
I think we pretty much covered everything. Just as an aside, one of the, I listen to a lot of podcasts I really enjoy, especially a TV guidance counselor, which I try to, when I explain it to normal people, they're just like, what? Like 1 out of 10 people will say like, yeah, that would be a really interesting thing to see what it was. I started the fan group for the Gilbert Gottfried Amazing Colossal podcast that's on Facebook. And all the time, people are suggesting guests who are a little bit more contemporary. Like Cassandra Peterson comes up all the time. And I put a link. I go, you should listen to the one that they did on TV Guidance Counselor. And I'm always pushing these guys over to listen to TV Guidance Counselor, especially the interview, the straight interview episodes, because I think they're really great. You do a terrific job of interviewing them and not just asking the most, not asking the ordinary questions.
Where do you get your ideas? Talk about this. Yeah.
What was it like?
Yeah. Just Chris Farley and him. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And a new question I'm asking for the lockdown. Do you have a comfort show that you're going back to while we're in lockdown? Are you binging anything from the olden days?
The first thing I did was the show. Oh, now I'm blanking on the name of it. It was on NBC a few years ago about time travel.
A few years ago about time travel. Not
Timeless is what it was called.
Timeless. Oh, yes. Isn't that based on the Time After Time with Jack the Ripper?
There was a time. It came out the same season. There was a Time After Time series.
Okay.
This one is it's like a government funded operation. And they had 2 time machines, and the bad guy stole the first one. So the good guys have to take the not as good one to follow them. And what's interesting about it is they actually change history.
Okay.
Not dramatically. It's like not a spoiler, but like in the first episode, they go back because the bad guy went to the Hindenburg, and then the Hindenburg lands.
Oh.
And they're like, what's up with that? But then when it takes off the next day, it blows up again.
Because time has to right itself.
Not necessarily that, but because the guy's going back to do something that will start a chain reaction of stuff for the future. It's a whole complex plot about a secret organization trying to change history, and it's actually very, very well done. But that was only 3 seasons. I got through that really quick, and now I'm binging the Match Game.
That's not a bad thing to do. I do that for Sale of the Century and Supermarket Sweep, but only when Rachel's not in the house, because she absolutely hates both those shows. I
noticed that just a week or so ago, a week before I got this issue of TV Guide, this week's Match Game I had just watched.
Oh, really? So October 7th from 1978. Was
on the Buzzer channel on cable, or I think that's over the air.
Oh, but,
yeah. So I had just seen that one. I think it was like with Greg Morris from Mission Impossible and stuff like that. Oh, and really? It's just there's a really eerie one. I'm watching Match Game, trying to like relax and keep my mind off of things of the simpler time. And this one particular slate of episodes, Gene Rayburn has just come back from visiting China.
Oh, wonderful.
And as a joke, he says to the audience of like, they come back and he's got the woman who won the first round, and they're going to do the super match and stuff. And he's like, I just have to warn you, I just came back from China and I coughed on you. So they've got diseases over there that you don't even know about. And I'm like,
wonderful.
Let me go get into the kitchen and get a knife.
Gene Rayburn knew. Yeah, I've been binging interviews, Dick Cavett interviews online.
Oh yeah.
And I was watching one the other day with him and Vincent Price, which was fascinating because it was the two of them just fawning over Oscar Wilde the whole time. That's it. They barely talked about it, but it was kind of cool. But Vincent Price made several references to Watergate and congressional hearings and stuff, and I was like, damn it. This reminds me of real life too much. Thank you for doing this. I'm glad we got to do it, and it was great talking to you, and I appreciate it.
Should the civilization survive, I would like to get an autographed copy of my my TV guide someday.
Oh, absolutely. I will. Yeah. I will pop that in the mail to you as soon as I'm brave enough to go back to the post office.
Very good.
Oh, baby, I see
There you go. That's Eric. Awesome dude. Had a great time talking to him. I have met him in person before. So we met at Dana Gould's Plan 9 from Outer Space show in New York like 3 years ago. So it didn't seem as weird to meet someone for the first time really in voice and vision on a computer screen. Although that is, as I said, the world in which we live. And I need to stop reading dystopian 70s science fiction novels, although I can't unread them and they're all in my brain. And it's a whole thing. Anyway, thanks so much for everyone who's listening. Thank you guys, everyone who's emailed me. I apologize if I haven't gotten back to you. Things have been weirdly odd. It's just, stuff's been strange. I don't know what day it is half the time. I still work a full-time day job, which I'm very grateful for. And I'm very grateful for you for listening and for everyone who gives to the Patreon. And again, if times are tough, please don't give to my Patreon. I know that you are very good people and I appreciate it. But save your money, or if you have someone who's more in need than me, please do that. But in the meantime, the people who do give, I very much appreciate you, and I will continue to try to put up more content on there and get you a little something, a little bang for your buck. I also am continuing my daily lockdown videos, which are increasingly getting more and more bizarre, and is a weird commitment that I have, don't know why I did that to myself, but I'm up to like 100 of them now. It's insane. Because I can't just sit and relax. Why would I do that? Also, thanks to all the new listeners who heard me on Allison Rosen's show again fairly recently. I was on Dead Air Dennis's show fairly recently. So I'm making the rounds. If you have a podcast you'd like me to guest on, either let me know at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com, or more importantly, let the people from that show know, because I can't book myself on my own. I can't pirate myself into their show. I can't just Zoom hijack their show. It's just not right. Anyway, hope you guys are okay, and we'll see you again next time for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
My Tribble just activated. Hold on.
Oh, you activated your Tribble.